So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our newest webinar. It's about bicarbonate in cycling. Especially, we have gravel cyclists here tonight as a guest. I'm super excited to welcome to Caro and Tobias. We know each other for, I think, 2 years now. They both are professional gravel cyclists for pass racing. And I'm super excited to share this topic with you guys. Hello, good evening. So we will talk about bicarbonate for peak cycling performance. I will introduce our two guests quickly. Right now, we're pretty much exactly 1 week before the Trucker race. This will take place next week in Spain, very close to Girona. And we actually have two former winners here tonight. So Caro won the race, the long Trucker 360 twice. She used to be a full-time software engineer, but she just told me that right now she's only focusing on cycling. She's originally from Poland, correct, Caro? And is now living in Switzerland and is a cyclist for Pass Racing. That is a multinational gravel cycling team. And this leads me to Tobias. Tobias is the team co-manager of Pass Racing. He's also racing himself. And like you can read, he's also a former Trucker 360 winner. Actually, you won the race last year, right, Tobias?
Yes.
So you will try to defend your title, I guess. And he used to be a professional road cyclist. And I'm super excited to share their experience also concerning bicarbonate. And we will discuss and talk about this topic. Feel free to put your questions in the comment section. We will either implement them in our current discussion, or we will try to answer them for sure towards the end of the webinar. And feel free to ask whatever is interesting for you, maybe also about our two guests, and especially, of course, about bicarbonate. So we will talk about what is bicarbonate. You also see our two products that we have in our product line and MNSTRY. We have the coated bicarb capsules with 1 gram of bicarbonate per capsule, and the kind of top-up strategy bicarb gel that has 5 grams of bicarbonate and also 40 grams of carbohydrates in a 1 to 0.8 glucose to fructose ratio. But this is not the real topic tonight. We will mostly focus on how does it work, what does it do, how does it work especially for cyclists, maybe also focusing on gravel cycling and other disciplines for sure as well, and why, or maybe why not to use it. And then for sure there's lots of room for discussion. So I will give a short introduction to what bicarbonate is and what it does in our organism. And then I think we can open the talk with Tobias and Caro. So bicarbonate comes in more or less 2 forms, either in the form of sodium bicarbonate, that is the typical one, but there's also potassium bicarbonate. Coming back to our products, the capsules, the coated capsules are fully sodium bicarbonate, and in the gel we have a combination of sodium and potassium bicarbonate. What is important to recognize is that sodium bicarbonate comes, like the name says, with a lot of sodium. So it consists of around 27% sodium. And if you take a full typical dose, that corresponds as an amount of around 3 heaped teaspoons of table salt. So this always have to be put into consideration when using bicarbonate. Bicarbonate can bind H+ ions. We'll come to this in detail in a second. And sodium can bring some possible problems, but can also help the organism. We will talk about that in a second. Then there's always this discussion, okay, why can I not use mostly potassium bicarbonate? I think potassium is a very interesting electrolyte, but for sure also in those high doses, it will lead to possible problems and imbalances with other electrolytes in our organism. What is super interesting, and I think this is also the main reason why we have it in our portfolio. MNSTRY is typically not a supplement company. We focus on nutrition for training and racing and recovery after training and racing. But we thought this one supplement is kind of a must, also in response to the needs of our sponsored athletes, the professional cyclists, for example. And they really wanted to use bicarbonate. And what is important for us, all our products are informed sport tested, and there's a lot of bicarbonate on the market, but very few products that are really tested. And that's why I think that was the decision to also implement it now in our portfolio. And why did we do it? Mostly because bicarbonate is one of the 5 dietary supplements that scientifically really work. The other 4 supplements are creatine. This is already gaining a little bit of interest also for endurance athletes, but mostly comes from strength training or strength sports, weightlifting, for example. Then the second that is interesting is beta-alanine. Beta-alanine works kind of on the same pathways as bicarbonate, but comes with some side effects. So you can take both together, but you can also take either or to have the effect of binding H+ ions. And we opted for the sodium bicarbonate. I will talk about this also in a second part. Then there's nitrates that mostly work for not elite athletes. And the last one is caffeine. Caffeine is the best or the most researched supplement, is also used widely, also outside of endurance sports. And of course, we have caffeine, for example, in our caffeine gels. So those 5 supplements really work, and they are scientifically very interesting also, especially sodium bicarbonate for cycling. How does it work? When you do intensive work, mostly at very high intensities, H+ ions are produced. I'll try to explain it physiologically. So most people probably understand intensive muscular work with the production of lactic acid, but lactic acid quickly dissolves into lactate and H+ ions. And the lactate actually works as a buffer in your muscles, and the H+ ions these H+ ions are causing the muscle burn and lead to fatigue. And binding those H+ ions can increase, or the intake of bicarbonate can increase the buffer capacity. You see here the buffering systems in the blood are bicarbonate. In English, you say bicarbonate. In German, you mostly use the word hydrogen carbonate. Then it's also hemoglobin, protein, and phosphate buffers. But the intake of bicarbonate can increase the buffer capacity in the blood and buffer those H+ ions. Those can be neutralized then, and the neutralization of those H+ ions prevent excessive pH reduction. And this is probably a little bit of a better explanation here. So how does it work? You see on the left picture that when you really work out in high intensities, the accumulation of hydrogen ions reduces the pH, so it gets kind of acidic, and this impairs the activity of glycolytic enzymes, also leading to decreased ATP production. It inhibits calcium binding, what can lead to fatigue and impaired muscle function. And this altogether accelerates the onset of fatigue. And bicarbonate is an extracellular buffer. opposed to that, beta-alanine would be an intracellular buffer, but indirectly also acts as at the intracellular level because it triggers the efflux of those H+ ions from the intra to the extracellular milieu. What is really interesting is we don't really know for each and every athlete, because of course the binding of those H+ ions via bicarbonate uses up the bicarbonate, and we don't know how much is used up and when is the right time to use more to increase the buffer capacity. This is something we don't know. But what we normally recommend is a loading strategy, typically with the capsules. It's also possible to combine the gel and the capsules if you, for example, want to get some extra energy pre-race in an easy digestible format with the gel. Then the combination of capsules and also the gel is possible. And then we recommend to take it like before the training or the race. And if it's a really long training or a long race, then a top-up strategy with another gel or maybe even two is possible. So this is the typical pathways of bicarbonate. So it can be used in training, it can be used in racing, but maybe we ask our guests now, maybe I start with Caro. Are you experienced with using bicarbonate? Maybe you can share some of your experiences. Did you use it in tracker? Do you use it in training? This was interesting for our guests and also for me, I guess.
So I started using it 1 year ago for the shorter races, the UCI races. This year I used it also for one of the longer races, the other, which was 1 week ago, which was 5 hours, and then I top up with the bicarb gel after 2.5 hours, and I could feel that it works till the end of the race. I don't use it for longer races like track on unbound because I'm afraid of like too much of sodium and of stomach issues. I will probably test it for some longer trainings, but still I think the cost of like being like so salty and like having to drink so much and then also like gaining more water, I will rather stick to like those 5 to 5 hour races, I would say. But I completely can feel the difference, and my stomach is happy. So that's the happy athlete.
Can you maybe share with us, how did you end up in the Sea Otter race?
Of course. But I have to admit that because of the bicarb, I felt like I think I pushed too much. So at the end, that I kind of like didn't have energy left for the final, which the final was crucial in the end because I responded to all the attacks and I tried to attack on the climbs, but nothing sticked. And then at the end, when it was really crucial, I was like, I started to cramp. Though the sodium of bicarb, like it was definitely because of the effort and not of like lack of sodium. So yeah, I think it's something that everyone has to keep in mind that there are limits and it helps. But yeah, for longer races, I think it's like it's important to know like to leave some energy for the end, though you feel good because like bicarb like really stops like kind of you don't feel your legs when you are riding super hard. But then energy is energy.
Toby, what about you? What are your experiences?
Yeah, I think they're a little bit similar as Cow. With that said, I think actually this year I'm going to use it a little bit more in training and also looking into Unbound, as I think Unbound is getting faster and faster. So it used to be a quite long endurance race, but now it's 7-8 hours of racing, and especially now with the bicarb gel being on the market, it could be super, super interesting to sit on top of, or actually maybe don't even start with the bicarb in the stomach, but just add on bicarb gels during the race. Because I think, as Karo, she says that I'm often getting almost too good legs in the beginning, and it cost some energy in the end of the race, where I really feel that I've been digging deep in to begin with. So I think for me, I need to be a little bit careful when I know I've been taking bicarb for the beginning. But of course, on the other hand, sometimes it's also to begin with that the race decides. So for me, if I can be in the front group due to bicarb, that means a lot. I would rather be in the front group and then maybe be a little bit tired than being dropped in the competitor with fresher legs for the final. So I think it's a cost benefit you always need to take and do. And I think for me, I always use it for, I think, all races up to 6 hours, unless the heat and if there's no feed zones. If I have unlimited water, for me, then I use it for all races.
Okay, so maybe we can also take a look in what was how the weight or how the knowledge of bicarbonate usage developed. It actually started almost 100 years ago. So this is the first study I found concerning using bicarbonate in relation with work or sports. And yeah, I think there's been a lot of experiments going on since then. And what we found out that approximately a 2 to 3% performance increase is more or less guaranteed, because the physiology just speaks for itself, especially in the efforts, I would say up to 10 or 12 minutes. This is very well researched. So typically for sports like swimming, rowing, middle distance running, it is a very, very popular supplement and has always been. And now with the introduction of stomach acid resistant capsules, we almost eliminated gastrointestinal problems, because a former problem was, for example, by taking pure powder, the powder reacted with the stomach acid and there was a lot of gas production and problems, and also the uptake in the intestine and the release in the blood was diminished. So I think the introduction of the stomach resistant capsules was a big step in better tolerability of higher doses of bicarbonate. What we can see is definitely a delayed muscle fatigue during intense exercise. We can see a prolonged performance at maximum exertion and a better and longer maintenance of muscle contraction strength due to a more stable pH level. And what is also super interesting, that probably when you have a typical, I just talk about a road race because I think this is easier to imagine. A classics race last week was, for example, Amstel, or the week before was Paris-Roubaix, and now the Ardennes Classics come. So on Sunday is Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So these are very typical races where you have climbs up to, or surges maybe up to 10 minutes, and then always a downhill or an easier phase. And what we see with the intake of bicarbonate, that possibly also the recovery between those surges and climbs is better, and you just feel fresher towards the end. One problem that Toby mentioned is like, you almost, in long races, you feel so good in the beginning when you did, for example, a loading strategy pre-race, that you attack too much or go over your limit, or maybe also increase the carbohydrate usage and then feel a little bit empty towards the end. But with this knowledge, you can either really pace well, or maybe, like Toby said, you are in a gravel race, typically you maybe are one group further ahead than you maybe could normally be, and a group really helps in long races, and maybe in the end it doesn't really matter that much if you go a little bit over the limit in the beginning, or maybe use up too many carbohydrates. So it's always a pro and contra. But what is super interesting, and this is something actually Julian Louis led me to, he often recommends using bicarbonate. Julian Louis is one of our scientists in our gremium, and he often recommends using it in training to enable an increased training intensity. You can, for example, I give an example of maybe VO2 max intervals. Maybe normally you would do like, I give one example I did myself. Like normally you do maybe like a HIIT decrease, like you do 3 and 2 minutes with 1 minute easy in between. Then you take 5 or 6 minutes easy. Then you do 2.5 and 2 minutes, 1 minute in between, 5, 6 minutes easy, and then you do 2 and 1.5 minutes. And with bicarbonate, it is, for example, for me, it's just my example, my personal experience. It is with the same kind of effort, you can then increase to 3, 2.5, and 2. So you add one extra interval, then you do 2.5, 2 and 1.5, and 2, 1.5, and 1 minute. So the total time in this VO2 max zone is longer, leading to better adaptations, and in a perfect world, to increase mitochondrial production. This is what we really want in cycling. So you increase not only your high intensity, or you not only adapt to high intensity exertions or workouts, but you increase your overall level, also leading to better endurance, for example, and durability. So this is super interesting. And there's one big study on it that shows that PGC1 alpha expression was higher by taking bicarb in a typical high-intensity training. And this is a sign for increased mitochondrial biogenesis. So very interesting results. Have you had any experience using it in training, Toby or Caro?
When I started to use it, first I used it in training, but then I just I didn't have any issues, so I just used it in racing. So I don't use it in training, but I think I should start using it just to reduce the muscles and get the advantage of being able to train on the higher loads.
Yeah, I think thinking more about it, I think I really need to start using it in training as well for the VO2 max efforts. For me, I'm a little bit old school, so I think back in the days we also didn't use energy for training. Now, of course, I eat for training, but I still also have that mind that you cannot do everything for training. You also go with training wheels and not carbon wheels, and I think it's a little bit similar with bicarb. You cannot do everything for training, but of course, if you have one of those monster epic days where you really need to peak, I think I really need to start using it. I think I have a ride coming up here in 1 month, an unbound prep ride. I think that could be super interesting to try to do it on a ride which is around 7, 8 hours. It could be super interesting to test 1 week before unbound how the body feel if you really start the preloading and then add on gels during the ride.
Yeah. What I did, for example, we'll come to that in a second as well, but I will share it now. Like I tried to use it in training, like I described with my workout, and I used it like purposely a little bit too late after breakfast. And then I looked how do I feel in the first set of intervals? How do that change? How does that feeling change in the second set of intervals, maybe in the third? And I could like really feel how my power went up in the second set of intervals, exactly around after 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30 after the intake of the bicarbonate capsule. So I can, with this, I found for myself, feel free to try it yourself, anyone. I found for myself, okay, this is the right timing for me to have like the biggest peak in my blood from bicarbonate around 2.5 hours after intake. And I took one dose with half a liter of water just for this experiment. The typical recommendations we will talk about in a second, how you should take it. And what is also possible, Caro, you talked about like, gaining water weight, also high salt intake. This can be a problem, but what is also possible that you really take care of eating low sodium foods or low sodium meals on the day of the sodium bicarbonate or bicarbonate usage. So I typically, it depends, of course, on your menu and stuff, but you can decrease the sodium amount in your food around training a lot. So you can also just see the sodium in those supplements as your sodium source and exclude most of other sodium sources in your diet, and then it's kind of a balance. This is what we did back in the days at Bora Hans Grohe. So we had low sodium soups and stuff. So it was kind of funny how we did it. But it is possible also to cook without sodium. So like I said, it could be used or can be used in training, and maybe not even in racing if you are too afraid to burn your matches too quickly. But in training, for sure, it's a very interesting tool. What is also, I think, a factor for using bicarbonate is that it's actually quite cheap. So it's not a super expensive supplement. A typical dose is not really like more than a gel or so. So it's not a super expensive supplement. And currently, I saw a study from Brazil, and they even showed big improvements at the 4 millimole level. So even in like a little bit lower intensity levels, there's definitely proof that it can help performance. There's probably also some H+ ion production at 4 millimole, and therefore it can improve performance, we would say, at typically threshold levels as well. Theoretically, it could be used for all racing, for all bike racing that include short surges, climbs, sprints, attacks, or maybe even planned fast finishes. I mean, even in a long race, there could be a sprint for the win. So if you have a few more percents of power left, then this could mean like winning or not winning the race. So it's super interesting. And even in ultra races, talking about tracker or unbound, it could be used strategically to make a planned attack, or maybe hold on to a group if you feel like, okay, this is typically the place where I want to attack, or maybe this is typically the place where I have problems with my performance, then it can be used strategically. But we also talked about this before. I forward the question to Caro. We said you will not use it for tracker. Can you tell us why you're not using it for you're doing the 360, tracker 360?
Yes. So to be honest, I haven't tested for such a long race. So I'm just afraid to try it first time on the race to race like 10 or 12 hours bicarb. And I'm just afraid of just having too much sodium, because we stay in one house, for example, and I think not many people will take bicarb, so we'll add salt to all the cooking, all the food that we eat together. So it would be just hard to cut the salt drastically. And maybe I could consider, depending how the race goes, to just use gels, kind of to start the bike up during the race, for the last part. We'll see. To be honest, right now I consider just taking 3 gels. It's also a good amount of carbs per hour. So then I think it's super good solution with the bicarb gels, that you can really start using it during the race and not before. So I'm just I haven't tested it, and I'm afraid of such big amount of sodium, because if you have to top up, for me, for women, multiple times during the race, I think it just would be too much. And also, we have limited resources of water. I hope it will be hot. So I'm just like I'm just too concerned and a bit conservative for now.
What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I think actually it's the same for me. For us, it's not really how I felt the past 3 years of Traga. It's not decided on those peak watts where I really feel that bicarb makes a difference for me. So I could be a little bit hesitant to that I will in the beginning of the race, the first half, where a lot of people is still in the peloton and is still around. I will probably be, if I had the bicarb legs, do a little bit too many attacks and burn the matches, and then in the second part where you really see who is good at these endurance races, I could be a little hesitant and afraid that my pack of matches has been low because I really went deep in the beginning. So I think I will not do it this year, but right now it looks like it's going to rain on Friday. So if it's cold and it's raining, I'm not that afraid of it. Then could really consider doing it. Yeah.
Okay. Like Caro said, I mean, it's always possible also to use it strategically, starting the intake of bicarbonate in the race. I mean, we have the gels solution. For you, for your body weight, probably 3 gels are enough. And this could also be considered. I mean, it's still a lot of salt, but what are the problems, or what are the how should you use it? So maybe we show just the presentation and then we can discuss it. So typically you need a certain amount of bicarbonate to have the desired effect of the buffering of the H+ ions, and you need between 0.2 and 0.3 grams per kilogram body weight. So if you are a female cyclist weighing 55 kilos, this would translate to 11 up to around 17 grams per total. And if you are 80 kilogram athlete, it's 16 to 24 grams. That's a lot of capsules. We know that, but one capsule contains exactly 1 gram of bicarbonate, so it's kind of easy to calculate. And in order to not have to ingest all capsules at once, we recommend to ingest it in 2 or 3 doses. 2 doses could be first dose 2.5 hours to 3 hours pre when you want it to be effective, and second dose after around 1 to 1.5 hours before the start of the race or training. The co-ingestion with water and also carbohydrates increase the alkalosis and typically also reduce the occurrence of gastrointestinal problems. I would rather use it too early than too late. The peak level is very individual. So for some, it's after 1 hour, for others, it's after 3 hours. Like I said, for example, I did a test taking it all at once, and then I could really feel when it kicked in. And for me, it was between 2:15 and 2:30 after intake. Watch the sodium intake. We already talked about it. You can, if you're at home, for example, in training, you can totally reduce the sodium intake. For example, avoiding bread, not salting your pasta, potatoes, or rice. Be careful with cheese and sausages that are typically sources of high sodium, or high sodium sources. I would recommend for sure to try it in training first and not on a A-level race, because you should really see how you feel with it, and typically not use it more than twice a week. For example, for high intensity trainings. More is not better, so don't take more than 0.3 gram per kilogram of body weight. It will not help more or help better. And I would, in the beginning, lean towards the lower dose, and maybe if you're a little bit more experienced and see how it feels, maybe try a little bit of a higher dose. There have been studies with co-ingestion of other supplements like caffeine or beta-alanine or ketones. The co-ingestion with beta-alanine can help, but it's not necessary. And I think from many reports from our athletes, sodium bicarbonate or bicarbonate intake alone can make a big of a difference. How could you maybe, if you never tried it before, how would be the typical steps? This is from the Australian Institute of Sport. Actually, if you're interested in supplements in general, a very good source for scientific informations on supplements. Like I said, they recommend the 5 supplements that I mentioned, and they're like the world leading source of scientific information about supplements. And on their homepage, you can find this. How would you use it? How would the way be if you want to use it in a race? I think the first step should be, is it even necessary for me? Do I profit from my race format? Like we said, if you do a super constant cycling race, a very long race, for example, ultra race, whereas flat profile or steady climbs, then probably it makes less sense. If you just go out and for health reasons and only do endurance training, then for sure bicarbonate is not the supplement you should consider. It is especially relevant for any athlete who wants to do high intensity trainings, who has typical races where there's high intensity surges, mountain bike cross country racing, gravel racing with short steep climbs, cycling, road cycling, classic racing, time trials, or like I said, VO2 max training. Those are the typical use cases for bicarbonate. Maybe it's also worth to consider to look, there's studies, there have been done a lot of studies, especially with men, but not so many with women. So we don't really know how it, we don't have really information on the effect of bicarbonate if you are menstruating or using contraceptives. I cannot really answer that question, and probably not anyone else can. Do you have any experience here, Caro? Or
And I'm an easy athlete. I never have like any experience with anything. So for me, it doesn't influence like at all. But there are people that like they have like painful menstruation or something like that. That maybe it can be like somehow affected or like I don't know. But I'm an easy person, so I didn't have any issues so far.
Okay. So the second phase then would be to use it isolated outside of any exercise or any training. Just try it without a training, see how you feel, how your stomach can digest it. Take it probably twice in maybe 2 hours apart. I would typically recommend starting with a lower dose. So if you're a 70 kilogram athlete, you start with 14 capsules. Maybe you use, for the first amount, you use 8 capsules, or around 60% of your individual amount. And for the second one, you use 40%, in this case, around 6 capsules, and see how you feel. And the third step would be to use it in training. If you can, I forgot this for the second step, if you are a professional athlete, maybe having access to a university or so, of course, it's also possible to measure the rise of bicarbonate in your blood with a blood gas analysis. We had 2 weeks ago, we had Mika here Mika Nord in the podcast, and we talked about bicarbonate in triathlon. He uses it a lot in training, and he's a Red Bull athlete. So in the Red Bull Athlete Center, they tested the rise of bicarbonate in the blood with the blood gas analysis. Or you do it like I did it in training, like maybe take it just all at once, maybe the lower dose. This is what I did, and then see how you feel in interval series. And for me, it was exactly 215 to 230 after the intake. So I know this is probably exactly my peak value after this time. You can also compare how you feel with bicarbonate, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later, or a week later, you can do the same the same interval session and using no bicarbonate and then compare your feel. I mean, this is not scientific, but gives you a good impression. Or is it, am I, and yeah, you're pretty safe because you tried it well enough before. Without training, with training, you have a strategy, and then you can use it in an important race. So this is the way that I would recommend to take it. We also already talked with Toby and Caro that they will probably rather not use it next week. Toby said maybe if it's raining, I will take it. I think it's also interesting maybe on a hot day because you use a lot of water. If you're a salty sweater, you use a lot of salt. So it could even lead to an improved hydration status. So I think it is to be considered. But what I noticed just for myself, that you always have that thirsty feeling, and probably this is what you're referring to or the thirst feeling, that with a high sodium intake, you always feel thirsty. And especially when it's hot, it's not a good feeling. Am I right? This is what I experienced. And then you kind of cannot really quench your thirst properly. And that's why I would also be careful on super hot days using it. But it could be different for others. Like I said, if you are a very salty sweater, lose a lot of salt in your sweat, and it's a hot day, that could actually be a positive point for using bicarbonate. Yeah.
I think going back to that on hot days, I think there's also, and maybe you can elaborate on that, something about the sodium concentration in the blood, which changes a little bit when you do the bicarbonate, therefore, if you don't drink more water when you take sodium bicarbonate, it can also lead to actually to dehydration in the end, which is one of the reasons that I've learned to be a little bit hesitant to use it for the very long and warm days, because it can actually lead to dehydration because it changes the sodium concentrate in the blood.
Yeah. So your body always tries to keep a balance of water and sodium in your body. And this is what we are referring to electrolyte imbalance and to dehydration. If the sodium concentration gets too high compared to the concentration of water in your body, you get really thirsty. And if you cannot really quench that thirst in that moment, probably your performance will decrease. We call it hypernatremia. The opposite would be hyponatremia, that we typically in the 80s, when all those city marathon running started, there were a lot of aid station just offering water, and the slow runners were drinking a lot of water without having any salt intake, and this could also be very detrimental to performance. So hyper and hyponatremia are a problem, and I totally agree. So we cannot really predict and measure it because we don't know what your body does in that moment in the race. So that's a little bit of a problem. But like you said, if you feel good in maybe like moderate temperatures and you have tried it in training, then for sure it's no problem to use it also maybe for longer races. Like we said, race tactics, gastrointestinal discomfort. If you have a really long race and you already ingest 100, 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour, do this for 10 hours. That's a lot of work for your intestines. So yeah, you have to really be individual and consider if you want to take it or not. But typical use case, like you said, a UCI gravel race between 3 and 5 hour duration, 3 and 4.5 hours duration, with really intensive surges, with short climbs, very high intensity, really important to be in groups. That's a typical use case for sodium bicarbonate. Super important where it should not be used when you have sodium-dependent hypertension. For sure, then a low sodium diet is super important. Also during training. Children and pregnant women are also not advised to take the recommended amount of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, so this is all what we wanted to talk about concerning the physiology and the effects and how to use it how to use bicarbonate in cycling. And I will try to answer some questions from our listeners. First question that I read here: do you have any issues with gaining a lot of weight through storing water in your body after taking bicarb for a race or hard training? I had the feeling that I gained more weight than normal after refueling and rehydrate after my last race/intake. Also, I felt a little watery, especially subcutaneous. Yes, that is a typical reaction. In some athletes, I can just share my experience in a World Tour cycling team that I worked with athletes. Some athletes would not gain any weight after sodium bicarbonate protocol, and others would gain like up to 3 kilograms from one day to the next. That is actually not relevant in training normally. Could be really relevant if you have 2 or 3 races in a row, like stage racing and road cycling. But you will probably need 24 to 36 hours to get rid of that water. And like I said, if you watch the sodium intake of your diet, maybe also like for example, you use it on a training day, let's say it's a Saturday or so, and you would already watch the sodium intake probably on Friday evening, for sure Saturday the whole day, and maybe even Sunday morning to reduce the sodium intake with food. And then you can see, okay, is the problem less? Is it the same? And then you can decide, is it for me or not? After how much time do you see blood levels peak after 0.3 kilogram preload or a gel of 5 grams under load? Very good question. So, like I said, it's very individual. If you really want to know it, you have to measure it with a blood gas analysis, or you have to feel it. Like in training, I think you can really feel the effect of bicarbonate when it really peaks. And what we know, the 5 gram gel or the 5 gram bicarbonate from a gel needs around 40 to 60 minutes to peak. So if you have a long race, like Toby said, or maybe Caro, you can share your strategy again that you used in Sea Otter. I think you said you used how much did you use pre-race, and then you used 1 or 2 gels in the race?
So I used 15 grams before the race and then 1 gel after 2.5 hours because I think it needs some time to start working. And the race was 5 hours in total.
Okay. What is also interesting, like I said, we don't really know how much is used up with intensive segments or so. So typically we see that the blood level decreases after 2.5 or 3 hours. So if you use it for a race up to 3, maybe maximum 4 hours, then probably the loading is enough. But if the race is longer, like in your case with 5 hours, then a top-up strategy is very important. So, and also after 2.5 hours, you probably peak after 3.5, and the effect lasts a little bit longer than those peaking. So for the final, you still had some bicarbonate left. For a 6-hour race, for example, I would recommend to use 2 gels for top up, preload, and then 2 gels. And like we said, for a very, very long race, you can even start in the race using probably the gels only. Other question, as a heavy, salty sweater, would it be an idea to take bicarb as a sodium source instead of salt capsules, electrolytes, tapped drink mix? For example, at the last 1/3 of the Trucker 360, when maybe we decrease carbs amount due to stomach fatigue and then rely on water and gel, and therefore trading a normal gel for bicarb gel? Absolutely. Your body don't or your body doesn't know the difference between sodium bicarbonate or sodium chloride or sodium citrate. It's sodium, so you can use it as a sodium source. And on the other hand, I would also recommend, if you take bicarb, for example, in training or racing, then I would rather use the low sodium gels and low sodium drinks that we also have in our product range. That's also a reason why we offer it. and not use the heat products, for example, that already are like higher in sodium. So yeah, definitely you can use the bicarb gels as a sodium source, but then probably it's better to use, like you say here in your example of tracker, use water and low sodium gels or other low sodium sources for your energy. Okay. Any questions from you, Toby or Caro?
Actually not. I think I when having used sodium bicarbonate for that long of time, I think I'm pretty well tested in it. But I think the interesting part, as we talked about earlier, the training thing is something I personally need to be better at using, and then start using the gels more. I've used them a little bit in the past for the races, which is 5 to 6 hours. But I think the training rides, which is leading up to 7 hours, if I really want to test my stomach, and I don't think there's any better places to test your stomach in doing training. So I think for me, eating quite a lot of gels, the bicarb gels going forward for training would be the main thing. But no, I think you got it pretty well covered about the blood, the sodium concentrate in the blood, which I personally has been a little bit hesitant about. That's also why I haven't been using it for the warmer races. But I think maybe now with the tracker being cold, it could be that it was the way to go.
Are you in shape for next week?
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people in shape for next week. But you know what? We have at least I know Carl also, but I think we have done our best, and you cannot do more than your best. So
we'll do our best, and we'll see how the others are.
And you know parts of the course from last year probably, or is it the same or is it different?
It's a bit different. It's 325 this year.
Okay.
It's a bit more of climbing. The beginning is different. There is no hike bike section. There are quite some improvement and changes. We'll see.
And you've also been to the Santaval. We met there. So parts of the Santaval course is also in Tracker, right?
Yeah. The end.
I think
at least some parts here and there at Girona.
So for anyone who hasn't been in Girona, the gravel bike, it's highly recommended. I think you can really find a lot of nice loops and climbs and downhills with a gravel bike, also mountain bike, also road bike. So highly recommended. I've been there first time last year and again this year, and I really liked it. Okay, thank you guys very much for joining tonight.
Thank you.
All the best for next week. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I see you soon. And thanks again for answering all those questions, your experience with bicarbonate, and all the best.
See you, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.